All right, we're here, and today we're going to go ahead and discuss asset protection. We're going to give you the information that you need to go ahead and take to your clients to actually isolate if your client has an asset protection need. And I'll tell you, in this day and age, many people have these needs that are unmet. We found in dealing with people that some people are horribly at risk and don't even know it. And with the use of a few simple asset protection planning techniques, they could go ahead and actually build a wall to separate them and protect them from creditors very, very easily. So, we always hear asset protection as some big, expensive, complex, change your whole life type of process. And while it can be that, normally just a couple simple things can give you peace of mind and give your clients peace of mind. So I'm going to go ahead, and I'm here with Charlie Stahl, and I'm A.J. Compreto. And I'm going to give you a little of my background, and I'll go first, Charlie, and then I'll let you. And Charlie's much smarter than me. He's the CPA. I'm just the attorney in the bunch, so I'm the litigious one. I like going ahead and just, charging forward. But I've been doing asset protection for now probably about 15, 17 years, and I got in it backwards. Most people will get into it and will say, well, I want to do that type of law. I got into it from the streets, and I hate to say from the gutters, but I actually was a bankruptcy attorney, and I had to keep people from losing their money. If you're a 65-year-old person who's worked all his life and has $100,000, and then all of a sudden you're faced with a horrible lawsuit for something or some bad business decision, that's all you got to live on. And they'd come to me and they'd say, AJ, save my life. Please save this $100,000 because I need it to live on. I don't work anymore, I'm retired. So I had to go in there and bang heads, go ahead and wring necks, and do whatever it took under the law to go ahead and protect that money. Well, over time, people started seeing that, and then all of a sudden I started getting referrals from big firms, because big firms back in those days, they wouldn't do asset protection. It was dirty, and they wouldn't touch it. So a lot of the big silk stocking law firms that were sitting there, they'd say, well, this is a really good client, can you help them? We can't do it, but can you do it? And I would go in there and work with these people, and again, use the same techniques that I learned with helping people in bankruptcy, because that's the ultimate thing with asset protection. If you can survive someone really kind of trying to attack you, take all your money away, and what I call the 900-pound gorilla, federal government, when you're in a bankruptcy proceeding, they're the 900-pound gorilla. They're going to take everything. It's like the IRS. You keep the IRS, you keep the federal government away, everybody else, those are the small fry.
Well, you know that.
So that's how we design our plans, and that's how I got into it. Like I said, I've been worked into it backwards, but now it's 17, 15 years, however long, and I'm getting really old in this respect later. And we're going to give you all that experience today so you can actually sit and talk with your clients. So let me let Charlie go ahead and give about his background.
Thanks, AJ. I appreciate all that. And, I didn't know that about you. After all these years working together, I never knew that backstory. I, too, have a backstory that you may not know. I got into this backwards as well. I was working at a large investment firm and was the surprise victim of a frivolous lawsuit unrelated to the investment business. My then best friend's ex-wife sued me because he left the country and refused to pay her alimony. I go, where did that come from? Yeah. And my lawyer says, that's frivolous, that's ridiculous. But 2 years later, after many, many depositions and interrogatories and so forth, and almost $100,000 in costs, not to mention my time, and the important point was many, many sleepless nights worried that my assets that I had built up, I was about 32 at the time, my assets that I built up through that point were going to be lost, either through these attorney fees, there's good attorneys, but sometimes they're not.
I understand.
And either through attorney's fees or from, suppose some jury didn't like me in my white shirt and yellow tie back in those days, working in an investment firm, and here's this pregnant lady whose husband took off on her and decided that she needed hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of my assets. And I spent many sleepless nights worried about this, and once the situation was resolved, I took that energy and turned it into learning all there was to know about asset protection. And back in those days,
build your own walls.
Yeah, totally. This is totally selfish. And back in those days, this was a dirty business. This was, it's quasi and so forth. You can do this and you can do that, but don't tell anybody about this or that. And I read every book and went to every seminar and traveled around the world and talked to all the experts and made phone calls and paid legal fees to try and get this advice and that advice, and finally started becoming my own little expert in this, and that was 1987. Wow, a long time ago. And
you're getting old too.
I'm getting old too. I am old.
Okay.
As opposed to you. But and being in the financial planning business myself, here I am. I had developed this body of knowledge strictly for my own benefit, and now go to my clients who are doctors or lawyers or have particular risks, and they're completely exposed. And their attorneys are not willing to help them because of the stigma related to this type of planning and business, or just the lack of knowledge that was out there. And so I would write letters to the attorneys, and I would try and move things along, and ended up writing a book a few years later, and another book on the subject. And I guess now, after all these time and travel and so forth, I guess I'm an expert. So at least we've done a lot
more.
of
You're a CPA also.
I'm a CPA.
And you've got all these designations. See, as an attorney, we just get an ESQ. You got all these other designations out there, CFMOB and things like that. So you really have the actual knowledge, training to back up. Plus the hard world knocks. You know, School of Hard Knocks.
This is not a, I don't think there's an actual course in this. There is no one body of knowledge you can tap into this, because a lot of what we're going to talk about this today, I hope, because it's so exciting for me, this is where my energy comes from, that one of the beautiful things about this is not just, okay, what's the statute say? What does the law say where your assets are saved? That's great. We can always do that. But many times that conflicts with other goals of financial planning. I mean, do we want to give all our money to our kids? Do we want to give all our money to our wife, who could become a horrible thing? Ex-wife. I've been there too. Not as an ex-wife, as an ex-husband. That's an expensive process. And do we want to put our assets in a position where we become a target of the IRS or federal government? Well, you need to manage all these areas at the same time to come up with the perfect mix and the perfect risk pattern for our clients and for ourselves, so that we can sleep at night. None of this keeps lawsuits away. People can still sue you for anything they want. This is America. This is how it works. But what this does is allow, when that happens, you get to sleep at night. Knowing you've done everything you can under the law and with planning and forethought to both protect yourselves against not just the lawsuits, but also the estate taxes and the income taxes. We have other financial planners in the room today. And you've done everything you can to protect yourself, and now it's time to sleep at night, and you may have to fight a battle or two as life goes on. I hope you don't. But on we go, and we've done everything we can. And that's what this is all about.
You hit a big thing, and this is for both of everybody in the room. It's managing risk and balancing risk. I often say that, asset protection, we can do things that build a wall so high that you can't even get to your own assets. And that's not what we want to do here. We want to give you the information so when you're sitting down with your client, you can actually sit there and say, okay, we look at what you have, let's manage this risk and see how comfortable. We think your risks are X, Y, and Z. You are in a risky business. You transport hazardous nuclear waste.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, and you don't have a corporation, it's you. Right. But here you have 20 luxury condos, they're all beachfront, and they're all still in your name. Well, maybe your risk over here, the transporting the hazardous nuclear waste, may come back and hurt all your investments that are over here. So we want to actually be able to isolate that and then manage that and then see exactly what your clients are comfortable with. It all comes down to doing the right thing for the client and giving them the right level of confidence. Again, as Charlie said, you don't want to not sleep at night. And you don't want to not sleep at night saying, well, God, did I do what's right? Now I have all these fancy assets, planning, and I don't even know where my stuff's at, and I'm not comfortable with it. So we want to balance that so that your clients are comfortable. So let's talk about risk a little. And this is a big thing, because I hate to say that, I often say we're not trying to scare people, but you got to be scared, because frivolous lawsuits are a fact of life. Just a fact of life. Right. It could be a $5,000 lawsuit from your neighbor because, he says your tree fell in his yard. Your tree fell in his yard, hit a rake that flipped up in the air, went flying, hit the power line, which then came down in the pool, which shocked the cat, and now he wants $5,000 for his cat because he loved that cat. And he's not going to settle for $1 less than $5,000. I use that as a kind of a farce, but if you read the frivolous lawsuits out there, they really do become kind of farcical. I mean, they're silly. And it doesn't mean that it's silly when you pull your checkbook out and the attorney says, I need $5,000 to represent you.
Or, like the many cases you hear about every year with those frivolous lawsuits where that burglar is breaking into the building and falls through the skylight and sues and wins how much? $800,000?
shot.
While he was burglarizing your building. He hurts himself and you end up having to pay him medical costs. It's ridiculous, that stuff.
I'm still shooting them coming in the door. I probably should not have that on the tape.
Probably.
That's my, you know. But let's talk about risk, because these are the first things that the people that you are representing and that you are advising really need to know. Where do risk come from? I'm going to let Charlie go ahead and hit this.
Well, the obvious ones, I mean, are always the professional ones. You know, the doctors, the lawyers, from a malpractice point of view, the architects, accountants, of course, engineers.
Realtors, though.
Realtors also.
Yeah.
I mean, where
Business people.
Business people. But the professional categories where a corporation cannot shield that risk, where you're out there, you're operating as a professional.
Right.
Corporations don't stop that risk. It pierces that corporate veil by law. And those people are usually very well aware of their risk, and sometimes it can be insured. The issue comes in that some of these risks should be 800-pound gorillas. What happens if it's not a small malpractice claim? What happens if you really did fall asleep during surgery, or you really did make an honest mistake that cost somebody a life, limb, or their...
Or they just want $50 million. You have $5 million in insurance. You did everything you're supposed to do, and you've advised your clients to do everything you're supposed to do, and you got a big insurance policy.
Right.
And they say, it's not enough because we went and looked at your client's assets, and we see he's got $10 million in assets. So we want it all. And we're not stopping.
And in a case like that, we're going to circle back around, but in a case like that, I call that the footprint. If our client, if you have a huge footprint that you're putting out there for everybody to see about how rich and how successful you are, and you're bragging to everybody about how much money you have in the bank, or it's obvious you're making a lot of money because of one thing or another. Now, movie stars can't get away from this because everybody wants to know how much money they make, but a lot of other people attract problems to themselves, both legally and personal, because they're living the big life, and they're out there doing things in a grand scale, which may be appropriate for their business. That may be the right thing to do, and that may be the way they grow their business. But people who do that unnecessarily are also attracting people who are jealous of them, who think that there are certain members of our society who think that anybody who is successful is therefore bad.
Well, government, we've talked about this before. There are actual people in government.
I wasn't going to mention the government.
Yeah,
You never know who's going to listen to this.
I don't care. I'm putting that down. There's actually government workers that believe if you actually have gone ahead and achieved a certain amount of wealth and success, that you must have done it in some type of illegal or unethical fashion, you know, and that you have to be scrutinized much harsher than everybody else. So let's say that you went and cut your mangroves. You know, we're down here in Florida, and all of a sudden you have environmental protection come in, and they also they think you're some type of polluter. There was actually just recently a big developer who got arrested for actually doing some type of environmental dumping. God knows, well, they probably were watching him because he lived this, you know, high life type of thing, you know. And we really want to make you, even if you want to live the high life, and this is something for the people listening, we're not making lifestyle decisions.
Oh,
we don't,
so.
yeah. This has, you know, we love everything like that. But we want to actually, when you go to the books and you go to the public records, we want to make you look like the Joe next door. You're an average Joe because they look at you and you got a house, you got a car, and not much else. And then if they pull a credit report on you, you got a house, you got a car, and you got some debt, and not much else. You know, that's our goal, because see, then you're the average Joe, and then when the attorney's on the other side, he's like, well, that $5 million insurance policy, yeah, let's just take the money and run. Because what are we going to get against? He's like me. You know, no one wants to squash the guy who's just like you. Everybody wants to squash OJ like a bug. And I use the OJ Simpson type thing, you know. In fact, they had an article, an interview on, and one of the attorneys just said, we just want him to go away. And we don't want to ever, one of the victims' families, we don't want to ever hear from him again, you know, over the book deal. And, you know, that's the whole thing. He keeps, like a bad penny, he keeps, you know, jumping up. And he keeps, people want to squash him. They want to step on him like a roach. You see a roach, you flip the light on this roach, you squash it. The average Joe, your next door neighbor who you really like, you want to do everything you can to help him. So if an attorney's suing a guy, and he's a really good guy, and he just made a mistake, and there's a $5 million policy, and there's not many assets out there, he's probably going to recommend to his client, just take the money,
Oh,
go home.
absolutely.
He made a mistake.
Attorneys want